This series is supported by Northern Trust, providing investment, trust, and estate services online at northerntrust.com.
This is Gulf Coast Live on WGCU. I'm Valarie Edwards. Welcome to today's show and welcome to our audience here in the WGCU studios. Several times a year, all of WGCU public media, radio, magazine, television, and web team up to report on one issue. We call it Your Voice, and we ask the community to become part of the conversation. This time around, our focus is on the availability of mental health care services in our community. But before we go any further, if you or someone you love may need help because of a mental illness, call 911 now and ask for a CIT officer, one trained in crisis intervention. You can also call NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, in Lee, Charlotte, or Collier counties, or call CARES Suicide Prevention. Finally, there is a list of resources available on our website, wgcu.org/yourvoice. Under the Florida Mental Health Act of 1971, also known as the Baker Act, anyone who is a harm to self or others may be involuntarily committed for up to 72 hours. Check this out from the Baker Act Reporting Center at the University of South Florida, representing the number of adults and children involuntarily committed in our community. Charlotte County, 830. Collier County, 824, Glades County, 26, Hendry County, 181, Lee County, 2,816, and Sarasota County, 2,209, for a total of 6,866 involuntary commitments in 2009. One would think with all of those involuntary commitments, there would be a wealth of resources available in Southwest Florida for children and adults living with mental illness. But that's not the case.
The one area that is lacking in our community is from the point that the individual is having a crisis and the point that you can get them help. Sometimes there is this gap period that we need to be able to take care of and get them treatment involuntarily and not release them until they are stable.
And that is the nexus of today's conversation. When you're in crisis, where do you find support? Where is the help? Maybe our guest today can provide some insight and direction. Please join me in welcoming David Sarche. He is the self-directed care manager for NAMI Collier County. Ron Stanford. Ron Stanford is a peer specialist at the David Lawrence Center in Naples. And Judge Peter Bell from the Charlotte County Mental Health Court. Welcome all of you to the WGCU studios this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. But before we go to our guest panelists, I want to ask of our studio audience, those of you joining us here in the WGCU studios, how many of you in our studio today have had to deal with a mental illness, either yourself or someone you love, and found there is no place to go for help? Let's see by a show of hands. Let's see if we can get some of those microphones over to our audience today. Keep your hands up, please. Give our microphone handlers a chance. Diane?
It is for my son, and we are self-pay, so we did actually have people to go to, many doctors, counselors, things like that. The problem was for 5 years we were not able to get any treatment that actually worked for him. Neither did we know the correct diagnosis. When I started demanding that we look at it in a medical way and wanted to see his brain activity, I couldn't find anyone here who even knew much about it, let alone could provide that service. So we did go to Denver, Colorado for a SPECT imaging scan, which was very helpful in us changing the direction of our course of treatment, and he was able to find proper care at that point. I understand we have SPECT imaging here in our area. However, I also was told that there were no doctors or technicians that knew how to use it or read it for such things as psychiatric.
Frustrating would be at minimal.
Yes.
It was a frustrating procedure. I see a couple of people here in the audience shaking their heads today when I mentioned frustrating. We have another question from our audience here. Dana?
My family had a small business, so we didn't have health insurance. So I received my first psychiatric diagnosis at a walk-in clinic. And from then on, I went to primary care physicians who gave me the wrong medication, which resulted in a psychosis, which resulted in an involuntary commitment at the age of 18. It was only after I was in a state mental hospital that I started receiving the psychiatric services that I needed, like a psychiatrist and medication management and counseling.
Frustrating again.
More than frustrating.
More than frustrating. A show of hands, how many of you have found frustration? We were going over here to my left with a microphone, please. Yes. Please stand up.
My nephew has suffered from mental illness for at least 10 years now. There has been no clear diagnosis for him. It's an illness that is unseen, therefore difficult to diagnose. He's been on all kinds of medication, none that really have helped him. He is a revolving door patient. He never quite gets the help he needs. He's in and out. They stabilize him. They send him on his way.
How old is your nephew now?
He is 27.
And how long has this
Since
battle
age
been
16.
going on? Since 9 years?
He was diagnosed ADD and was put on medication, which he now claims made it worse. I believe he was bipolar then, and I've read that it does make bipolar worse with wrong medications.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So it's been a rough battle.
Let's take another question from our audience. Noah?
Yes. Well, I've had mental illness since I was born. Been dealing with it my whole life, and the stigma has really been a major issue for me. I eventually wound up in the mental health court program, and what ended up happening was they referred me to a doctor that referred me to Hope Clubhouse. And my life has changed ever since. I'm sorry if I start to cry. But,
oh, please don't.
Please
feel free. This is your life you're talking about. Noah,
yes.
Feel free to cry.
Well, that's just it. It is my life. I am Noah Diamond. I am not my mental illness, not my diagnosis. I am Noah Diamond, and that's how I would like to be treated.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
We are talking today about the availability of mental health resources in our community. I want to invite our listeners to join the conversation this afternoon. 1-877-428-8255 is the number. 1-877-GCU-TALK. You can also send us an email. We are Gulf Coast Live at WGCU.org. Find us on Facebook at WGCU Public Media, or you can visit our statewide blog, WGCU.org/yourvoice. This is such an important issue. I know our panelists are waiting here patiently for our questions to come to them, but I hear this word over and over again, frustration. So before we get to the panelists, let's get some more hands up, and let's hear from some more of our studio audience. Let's get a microphone over to you. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're from.
Sarah Henry. I'm in Naples. I work in Naples and Fort Myers as a psychotherapist, and I also work with a NAMI program, HUGS. What I'm just responding to for the people who have talked already is that a lot of times people get help, and this has been my experience with a family member and also many people that I've helped, where we're getting help, but it's hard to understand the help.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like a response to a certain medication, and it's a process to address mental illness. And so finding a program or somebody to connect to that helps you put the whole picture together is so invaluable. There are a lot of good doctors, therapists, other services out there, but how to understand how it all works and addresses your own illness or your family member's illness is a significant part of it. What we do through the HUGS program is we work with families to help them understand the whole picture. A lot of times they've been in systems for a long period of time and they just don't understand the information that they're getting. So I think that's a big part of it.
You've mentioned HUGS a couple of times here. Rosemary Schwager is with HUGS for NAMI Collier County. Rosemary, if you could just briefly explain what HUGS is.
Oh, absolutely. The HUGS program actually started by a collaboration of partners who saw the need for our children in our community of Collier County get services that they didn't have. They were actually, a study was done, and they saw that children in the county were not meeting the needs.
Having their needs met. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, they weren't even graduating from kindergarten. They were failing kindergarten. So this was something that they wanted to address. Through Naples Winter Wine Festival and the NCEF, they were able to fund the HUGS program. And what happened was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we went, as system navigators, we went out into the community and we started to assess the children to see how many children were actually in need of services.
What did you find, Rosemary?
We have assessed over 2,000 children.
Alone in Collier County.
Alone in Collier County. And out of that, I'm going to check with Sarah, because Sarah is the other system navigator. We have probably seen 183 children who were in need of services. Now, I'm talking about the whole part of the child. So it wasn't just mental health. It was occupational, speech, and physical therapy.
Okay. Rosemary mentioned something I want to talk about. The word I'm hearing time and time again from both the professionals and the family members here in the audience, you can sit down, is frustration. We have heard throughout this week of programming here on WGCU, we have heard from listeners, we have gotten voicemails, we have gotten emails, we've had postings to our website. I want to read a letter that we got from one parent just briefly. And she says, our experience with the mental health community was a nightmare. My second son started to show symptoms of mental illness when he was 7. He was angry, defiant, and seemed to view the world in a distorted way. Most mentally ill people are not violent, but some are. In Florida, the answer to mental illness is imprisonment, not prevention. We received no help while in crisis and were even accused of creating the problem. She didn't want to sign her letter, and we appreciate that. But I think this mother speaks to how desperately families want to know something where they can go for help for their loved ones. I want to go to our panelists this afternoon. Let me give our phone number one more time. It's 1-877-428-8255, 1-877-GCU-TALK. You can also contact us via email. We'd love to hear from you. It's wgcu.org/yourvoice. Or you can visit our statewide blog. It's wgcu.org/Gulf. It's Gulf Coast Live. It's Florida Talks. My sincere apology. It's wgcu.org/Florida Talks. I want to go to our panelists now. You guys have been sitting patiently and you've listened. You've heard the frustration from our audience this afternoon. Judge Bell, I want to start with you. In Charlotte County, what is the role? You're the head of the mental health court in Charlotte County. Yes. What's the role of the mental health court in that community?
The mental health court is what's called a diversion program for someone who has been arrested for some criminal act. It is an alternative to a simple sanction. When I say simple, I don't mean simplistic, but an exclusive sanction. Sanctions are designed for punishment. The mental health court program addresses both sanctions and treatment, because the studies show that if someone has an untreated mental illness, they go into the criminal justice system, they receive a sanction, they complete their sanction, they come out the other side, they're likely to simply reoffend if the mental illness issue isn't addressed. So we have decided in Charlotte County to address that issue, decided that about 6 years ago, and set up, through a collaboration of a number of people and entities, set up a mental health court program in Charlotte County to deal with people who have criminal cases and a mental illness issue.
And how many people have you seen in the Charlotte County Mental Health Court in the 6 years since it was set up?
I don't have the total figures. I've got some numbers for this year, but
let's see the numbers for this year. What do you have for us?
All right. The program has its commencement at the point of what we call referral. Someone gets arrested, and then someone in the criminal justice system sees that that person might be appropriate for the mental health court program. And so they make a referral. We get referrals from the state attorney's office, from the public defender's office, from the sheriff's office, from the one of our local mental health service providers, Charlotte Behavioral Health Care. Our probation officers will provide referrals. An individual can refer themselves. That referral is then processed and evaluated by a mental health professional and then by the state attorney's office, first to ensure that they're appropriate for the program in terms of the mental illness issue, and then second to make sure that they're appropriate with regard to the safety of the community. If they are approved, then they can enter into that program. And we have had referrals thus far this year, about 109 for our program. Of those, 17 have been accepted to date, and we have about 3 more slated to enter this month. And so that's kind of the scope of the program now. We get the referrals, they're evaluated, and if they're acceptable, they come into the program.
Judge Peter Bell is with the Charlotte County Mental Health Court. He heads the Charlotte County Mental Health Court. Ron Stanford is a peer specialist with NAMI, Collier County, with the David Lawrence Center in Naples. And Dave, I'm sorry, it just popped out of my head.
My name?
Yes.
Sarche.
Yeah, Dave Sarche. My sincere apologies. Okay. Dave Sarche is the director of the NAMI Collier County Self-Directed Care Program. I want to invite our listeners to join our conversation this afternoon. 1-877-428-8255, 1-877-GCU Talk. You can also send us an email, gulfcoastlive@wgcu.org, or find us on Facebook. We are WGCU Public Media. I see a hand raised here in the audience. Let's get a microphone over to you. Just a moment. Yeah? Just stand up, Joanne.
Yes.
I'm sorry, did you have a comment or question today?
Well, yes, because what you said applies to me somewhat. My name's Joanne, and I have, within this diversion program is something similar, I believe. It wasn't called mental court for me, but recently I was arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct. I've never been arrested in my life for anything, and I believe it had something to do with my mental illness, becoming paranoid and creating in my mind an idea that someone was, I don't want to get into the details of it.
Let me ask you something. When called 911,
I'm the one that called the police.
Did you ask for a CIT officer?
No, I did not.
Did you know what a CIT officer is?
I'd heard of the program, but I didn't quite understand how it worked. And so I had called the police, believing these people were doing something illegal, actually growing, harvesting opium plants. Okay, so it was paranoid type idea that had been progressing for a month due to some other information that had been given to me. And I'm on my meds, and I've been on my meds for many years. I was diagnosed at the age of 23 with manic depression. And anyway, the officer treated me, I thought, very poorly, and he didn't really listen to my what I had to say. And in the report that I got and read, he wrote that I was like slurring my words, and I haven't drank alcohol or used drugs. I'm in a 12-step program for many, for a long time.
Joanne, you bring up a very good point. Police responded to your situation, did not know what was going on. Later in today's show, we're going to speak with a police officer who does have CIT training, and the question we're going to ask her is, what do you do? What can friends or family do when there's an emergency and the police are called and no one has CIT training? We're going to answer that question.
And one of the big points I want to make is in the jail, they said 60% of the people in here are bipolar when I was trying to tell them, because they wouldn't, I tried to get them to give me on my meds and things like that, and I was surprised that they said that. They go, 60% of the people in here are bipolar.
We're going to get back to Judge Bell on that one. Thanks for that point. I want to give our phone number one more time. Let's see if we can't get some of our callers into the conversation. 1-877-428-8255 is the number. 1-877-GCU Talk. You can also send us an email, gulfcoastlive@wgcu.org. Valarie Alker is manning the phones this afternoon. Valarie, I understand we have a call.
We have Domingo on the phone from Fort Myers. Welcome to the program.
Domingo, do you have a question or comment for our guest this afternoon?
How you doing, Miss Valarie?
Hello, Domingo.
I was interviewed to go for the TV show, and I would like to say there is hope. Here at the Ministry of Health, and also I got it from the NAMI of the Lee County. And there's hope, yes there is, and with me, in my early years, it was a lot of frustration, but you know what? It takes 50% of your medication to do that, alleviate your illness, and 60%, that's what the psychiatrist said, you can do it on your own. And that's what I've been doing, Valarie, and it took me 30 years to get my right medication and my right therapy. And I got into the Lee Mental Health, and I'm very happy, and I do volunteer a lot. And I do DJing for NAMI organizations and funding for them. So there's hope? Yes, there is. And those are my words, ma'am. And I love you for having me on your show. And I'm looking forward to see the TV show on Thursday and Friday.
Thanks, Domingo. Thanks for calling. Domingo is one of several community members who came into the WGCU studios to share his story with us, and those videos are posted on our website. It's wgcu.org/Your Voice. Today we're examining the availability of mental health care services in our community. Our guests this afternoon are David Sarche. He is the self-directed care manager for NAMI Collier County. Ron Stanford is a peer specialist with the David Lawrence Center in Naples, and Judge Peter Bell heads the Charlotte County Mental Health Court. We want to invite our listeners to join the conversation this afternoon. 1-877-428-8255, 1-877-GCU-TALK. You can also send us an email, gulfcoastlive@wgcu.org, or find us on Facebook at WGCU Public Media. Let's go back to the phones. This time we have another phone call. Valarie Alker is on the phones today, this afternoon. Valarie?
We have Allie on the phone from Fort Myers.
Allie, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. You have a comment or question?
Good afternoon, Valarie. Yes. You know, I just want to say, I've been dealing with bipolar for almost 20 years. I just moved recently from Michigan to Fort Myers, and I've had quite the experience at Lee Mental Health. That's where I go to see my doctor because I don't have insurance. And I understand it's a nonprofit, that they do not get help from the state, is what I've been informed. I could be wrong. But it's just the whole experience going there and mental illness on top of it, and getting the runaround and things not going the way properly, that things, it should be run smooth. It doesn't run smooth at all. Every time I've gone there 8 months now, and every month that I go there, there's always a problem. I guess
I'm hearing the frustration. I'm hearing the frustration, and you've got people in the audience nodding their heads. I think you're echoing the sentiment of a lot of people.
And I dealt, in Michigan, the best service. I know what it's like to have a smooth run facility. But as a community, what can we do to better this? Why is this happening? Why is the government or profit, I don't know, like when it comes to the next level, how can we improve mental health?
You know what? That's a good place to end. That's a good place to ask. Let's ask the panelists that very same question. Judge Peter Bell, let's start with you.
Okay, could I get you to just
She wanted to know, how can we get the community, how can we get the legislators, how can we get our lawmakers to understand the importance of mental health care in our community, so that there are so many people who are saying they're frustrated, they need the help. How do we make people understand?
I would have to say that that's an excellent question, and it's a very broad question. To me, from my own perspective, being a resident of Charlotte County, and answering it from that perspective more so than from the court's perspective, is that there is a tremendous need to communicate to the community, the entire community, the reality of mental illnesses and the need to address that. And so to me, that would be the first focus. If we can communicate that to the community, then the community can focus their efforts to contact who needs to be contacted to take the next steps, either through the courts or whatever. but the community needs to be the starting place, because the community is the place from which these people, the community is the place where our friends and neighbors live who are struggling with this issue. And if they're going to get into the courts or somewhere else, they're eventually going to go back to the community. And that's the longer term location where our friends and neighbors need to be dealing with this, and it's at a community level. So we need to get the message to the community, and there is a lot of lack of information in the community with regard to even the existence, much less the nature of mental illnesses.
Thank you very much, Judge Peter Bell. Ron Stanford, let's hear from you on that point.
I've had bipolar disorder since I was 26 years old, and we began to navigate a course, my family and I, for which to get support. At first, I went through several doctors, and I think it's important that you have a very close communication and relationship with your doctor. And if that means going through one or two of them before you get to the one that works closely with you, go ahead and do that. Or if you're frustrated with the way things are going with the one that you have now, write down about 5 or 10 questions that you have for the doctor before the visit, and that way you'll remember the questions that you have for the doctor, and perhaps they can help even more.
Make it a smoother transition. Thanks very much, Ron Stanford. Let's go back to the phones. I see a lot of hands raised here in the audience. Let's get the people on the phones involved in the conversation. I want to give out the phone number one more time. It's 1-877-428-8255, 1-877-GCU Talk. Valerie, we have someone on the phone?
We have Kim calling from Fort Myers.
Kim, good afternoon and welcome to Gulf Coast Live.
Thank you. I'm calling because I have a son who is bipolar, and he's just turned 18 and spent his 18th birthday in a juvenile detention facility. He's doing his program there, and I feel, unfortunately, responsible for bringing him into the legal system, which was not the best thing to do for him. He was out of control in my house one night, and I had been told if I called the police, they would assist me to Baker Act. Instead of Baker Acting him, they arrested him. And when I said I want to press charges, they wouldn't let me not press charges because I had other children in my home. And once I got into the legal system, I couldn't get him out. The police came to him for anything that went wrong in my neighborhood. They assumed it was my child. And it was very frustrating. When I finally spoke to NAMI, I was told that it's much simpler for an officer to arrest a child and just drop them at JJ than it is to Baker Act. So sometimes the information gets conflicted, and a lot of these officers don't have the training that they need.
Thank you very much for your call. We have someone in our audience who's vigorously nodding his head in response to your call. Ken, you're nodding, and are you agreeing with what our caller is saying?
Yes, I am. What had happened in our family is our daughter had actually called on herself when she was in a manic episode. She ended up, the sheriff's deputy that came to the house told my wife Joyce here was trying to get a CIT officer. At that time, there were virtually none in Charlotte County. And the deputy that responded did not even know what she was talking about. He ended up arresting my daughter, saying that he was going to teach her a lesson. And she did go to the jail. And because she was in a manic state, she reacted in the jail. She jumped over a table and locked herself in a bathroom, which caused her to get a 5-year felony for jail escape. She resisted when they came in. She got a 5-year felony for resisting an officer and a 5-year felony for assaulting an officer. She's 5 foot 105 pounds, and she attacked all these officers. But anyways,
Ken, let me interrupt you for a moment, because I see a lot of people shaking their head about CIT officers. I was going to save that for a little later,
Okay.
but it looks like we're going to have to
Cut me off.
No, I'm not going to cut you off. I'm going to let you continue talking, but it seems like we're going to have to address this right now. So Ken, why don't you go on and finish your story?
I'm trying to keep it really brief.
Go ahead.
What the next step was her being interviewed by the detective for these felonies. My wife did manage. Unfortunately, my daughter's an adult, so we weren't allowed privy to much information. My wife did talk to the detective that day, and the detective told my wife that she was cutting my daughter short. She didn't have a mental illness. I believe she was very intelligent. That she was, forgive me, she was cutting my daughter short because my daughter is very intelligent. My wife was trying to tell him that had nothing to do with the mental illness, but that didn't work. And,
You're listening to Gulf. Thank you very much for your
Okay,
story,
thanks.
Ken. You're listening to Gulf Coast Live on WGCU. As today we examine the availability of mental health resources in our community, and we're asking the question, where is the help? Often it's law enforcement who are first responders when there is a mental health crisis. For many years, mental health advocates decried the lack of police sensitivity and training when responding where someone is suspected of having a mental disorder. Around the country, people with mental illnesses were being assaulted, beaten, sometimes killed by police. In response, Memphis police in 1988 created a program which has since become a nationwide model. It's called CIT, Crisis Intervention Training. But when there is an emergency, as we just heard Ken say, and there is no CIT officer available, the results can be disastrous.
We've also had an experience where our daughter had called on herself and a police officer arrived, and I said, "Are you a CIT officer?" Well, he didn't know what that meant. So it is so important for training, and because a CIT officer would know how to de-escalate. They also know how to give protection to all parties involved.
I want to introduce Fort Myers Police Officer Melissa Clay. She is one of several officers in Fort Myers with the Fort Myers Police Department with CIT training. And this training was vital in April 2010 when Fort Myers PD got a call from a man who was suicidal. Officer Clay, describe for us, if you can, the events of 2010. 911 gets a call. The man says he's feeling suicidal.
Yes, it was a 911 hang-up, and the individual had said that only information that we had was that he wanted the police. I arrived and got out of the car, and I saw an individual, a male, kind of leaning against his mailbox. As I approached him, I noticed that he had one of his arms behind his back, but he was very casual, and you know, in training, they teach us the hands are what can hurt us. So I said, "How are you today? And can you do me a favor? Take your hand from behind your back." And he said to me that he was feeling suicidal. And as he said that, he had a gun, and he kind of turned, and he got on the ground, and he said, "You're going to have to shoot me."
How often do you get these kind of calls?
We get them every day. We get them multiple times in a day.
So your CIT training kicks in, but Officer Clay, at any time did you feel for your own safety?
Initially, yes, and it was a very short time as I was walking toward him. And obviously our training kicks in, and you take cover, and you unfortunately have to, if you see a gun, you have to use your gun. Thankfully that day I didn't have to use my gun, and everything turned out perfect.
I want to ask a question in response to Ken and Joyce's concern. Keep standing. What happens when you call 911? Joanne had the same incident happen. You call 911 and an officer responds, but they have no CIT training. What are family and friends supposed to do then?
I think that's a good question. I know that most agencies have policies and procedures in reference to, mental illness and, if particular the Baker Act. If we feel like, and it is hard to determine, in defense of law enforcement, what is the best course of action. It's very simple when they say, I want to shoot myself, I want to kill myself, or I want to kill my mom. There's also gray area, and sometimes we don't always know what the best course of action. But going back to if there's not a CIT officer, hopefully the officer that responds can point you in the right direction. Sometimes, unfortunately, if there is a clear violation of a law, they need to go to jail, like the domestic violence law. Other times...
Yeah, let's hear from Joyce. Joyce, who we just saw on tape, Joyce Miller.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that I am associated with NAMI, and I work with the Hope Clubhouse here in Southwest Florida. And what I want to talk about is when my daughter did call the police on herself, she was in exasperation of her illness. She was in compliance with her meds, but she had never done anything wrong in her life. She was a champion Irish dancer, but for the first time ever, she was smoking cigarettes, which with the medication she was on, which we would not know and she didn't know because she had never smoked, it exacerbated her illness. So when the officer came to my house, I asked immediately if he was a CIT officer. He did not know what I meant. And then I proceeded to tell him.
Where do you live, Joyce?
We live in Punta Gorda.
In Punta Gorda.
Yes.
Is that that's Charlotte County?
Charlotte County.
Charlotte County.
Yes, Charlotte County.
I would say, in defense of law enforcement, or, when you first realized or had someone in your life that was mentally ill, you probably didn't know what it looked like, what the symptoms were, the behaviors. And so sometimes, especially newer officers who don't have as much experience, they show up and they have no clue what to do because they've never seen it before. I remember the first time I saw a manic inmate, because I worked at the prison, and I was like, wow, what am I supposed to do with this? So we don't always know, and on the other side, you guys don't always know what to do.
Right. I understand that. However, I did reiterate about NAMI, about her file that she has. But he said, his words were, I'm going to teach her a lesson for calling 911. Now, when she got, he did say to call the Sheriff's Department. When I did that, I called 3 times.
Hold on, Joyce, hold on, because I want to get Judge Peter Bell involved in this conversation. Punta Gorda is in Charlotte County. By the way. Yeah. So, Judge Bell, you're hearing what Joyce and Ken have to say about their daughter. We saw Joyce on the clip earlier. When presumably her daughter appears in your court, how do you respond? The testimony that you're hearing from Joyce today about her daughter's situation.
Well, hopefully before she gets in front of me, she would be contacted by someone who would make a referral based on anything that she might say with regard to a mental illness. As soon as that information is picked up and the sheriff's office has agreed to provide preliminary information when their officers receive anything that suggests that a person might have a mental illness, we have an organization that works with the courts called Pretrial Services. If they hear anything with regard to somebody having a mental illness, they're immediately referred for the mental health court program. And so they are evaluated with regard to that specific issue early on in the cases. We have certain time frame goals with regard to the time from the date of arrest, date of referral, to entry into the mental health court program. So we actually have our mental health court program on an expedited track to try and get these people to the services that they need if they're in the criminal justice system as quickly as possible. I have a little extra information on CIT in Charlotte County because it sounds like we're kind of languishing there, but we actually have started a CIT training program, and they've had 3 classes graduate, approximately 15 to 20 in a class. They've opened it up to probation officers.
When was that?
Well, they've done it, I think, over the course of the last year and a half.
So this is something recent.
It is relatively new, and
Okay.
they're also opening it up to officers in neighboring counties to bring them in for training. So they're trying to really expand the CIT officer training program in Charlotte County.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Let's give the number one more time. You are listening to Your Voice on Gulf Coast Live as we examine the availability of mental health resources in our community. The number is 1-877-428-8255, 1-877-GCU Talk. We've got a caller on the line. Let's take a call.
From Laura in Sanibel.
Hello. Hello, Valerie.
Hi.
I am a former mental health professional. I'm now retired. I wanted to talk about an issue that I hadn't heard. I had a dreadful time trying to find a psychiatrist for my grandson, whom I was raising and who had a major break and a suicide attempt. He was discharged from the hospital in Pennsylvania. I brought him home, and what I could not find was an adolescent psychiatrist in Fort Myers. There are a few.
How long has this been going on?
Oh, this is an incident that happened 3 years ago. Okay, but at the time, I took him to his pediatrician, who had been seeing him since he was 7. This pediatrician refused to see him, refused to medicate him. Sent out his PA, who told us that if we wanted to get treatment for him, we should move to Tampa.
Hold on, because I'm not understanding something. You took your son to a pediatrician, and you wanted.
It was my grandson.
Your grandson to a pediatrician, and you wanted your pediatrician to medicate him. Is that correct?
Well, I wanted my pediatrician he had been discharged from the hospital on medication, and I wanted my pediatrician to renew the prescription because he was out of meds, and I couldn't find a psychiatrist to see him. Eventually, I did find a wonderful psychiatrist, Dr. Catherine Larnett, who's one of your major contributors to the station, who handled the case absolutely brilliantly. But I just wanted to speak. Adolescent psychiatric patients are a real handful, and there's just an enormous scarcity of people who are willing to see these kids as outpatients in Fort Myers. That's just what I want to say.
Thank you very much for your call. You're listening to Your Voice on Gulf Coast Live as we examine the availability of mental health resources in our community. We've got a lot of people here in the studio audience today with their hands up. Let's take another. Stand up. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're from.
My name's Dr. Marianne Krauk. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist from Fort Myers. I moved here in 2007 from a state, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area that had a wealth of resources, and I was expecting that it could be a reality here as well. What I'm hearing today is frustration from people who have mental illness, and there are friends, neighbors, families. There has to be more respect. Obviously, education. On the other hand, we need to attract physicians who are psychiatrists, who are trained as child and adolescent psychiatrists, to this area to partner and work with the systems in place. I've worked in public psychiatry since 84, and I have been burned out trying to work here, and I think that it's not taken into consideration that psychiatrists are also vulnerable, and that there is not a good support system here to create an environment where you can stay and be effective, and to value what we have to offer as child and adolescent psychiatrists, fellowship trained beyond psychiatry.
Marianne, thank you very much. I am. All this week we have tried incredibly hard to cover so much, and literally we could talk for hours, right? We could talk for hours and never cover just even a small amount of what needs to be done in our community. We showed you the numbers earlier. The number of people who have been involuntarily committed. We've heard from parents. We've heard from professionals. This is what this conversation is about. This is what your voice is about. We find an issue that everyone wants to talk about, and we come to you. And WGCU puts all of our resources into bringing you these issues. We are almost out of time for today. We haven't heard from our experts. We got to do that. I know you guys have your hands up in the audience. We're going to keep on going for a little while. So be patient with me. I got to talk to Ron Stanford. He's a peer counselor with the David Lawrence Center in Naples. And Ron, your work as a peer counselor, it seems invaluable. How would you describe it, though?
I'd agree with you. It is invaluable, whether it be myself or another certified recovery peer specialist on the unit. Sometimes when people come in to the crisis stabilization unit, they don't have anybody to support them whatsoever, family or whatnot. And we're the people that come to talk to them, we're the only ones that are their first line of support.
And you come from that, you come and you talk to them from your own experiences. You've been there.
I've been there. And I've had depressions, I've had manias. I haven't had a major episode in 11 or 12 years, so I'm a success story that way. And that's how the National Alliance on Mental Illness and the David Lawrence Center want it. They want me to be able to instill hope to these consumers and let them know that their recovery is a reality.
I think that deserves a round of applause. What do you say? Thank you. Thank you so much, Ron Stanford. You know, we've been talking about community-based care. It's really important. That's what we're hearing from a lot of you here today, how the importance of having someone in the community so you can avoid the justice system, so you can avoid police. I want to go to Dave Sarche. He is the director of the Self-Directed Care Program for NAMI Collier County. Dave, you've listened today. You've heard the frustration. You've heard from our callers, from our studio audience. Self-directed care, has that become the norm for treating mental illnesses in our community?
No, it's not the norm. It's really a payment model more than anything else.
I'm sorry?
It's a payment model.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean?
Meaning that self-directed care doesn't provide any direct clinical services. It's more about how the process by which people access existing services. And what I mean by that is people create their own recovery goals, and then they utilize the program and the funding that's involved with the program to create a budget to access their own existing clinical sources of choice. But in addition to that, alternatives. So people might use acupuncture or massage or different things like that.
So you're talking about giving alternatives.
That's part of it, but the main feature is choice and the person having the power and the command of those dollars to select what's most helpful to them. And that in and of itself is tremendously empowering. So it's a kind of a different dimension. I know this program is largely about the availability of services. You know, self-directed care is more about how people access services that they choose.
But Dave, I got to ask you, when you're in crisis, how can someone in crisis be expected to manage their own care?
Well, they could be connected with their own traditional clinical services just like anybody else. The difference is that they have selected those people, and we always encourage people to plan ahead for those circumstances with advanced directives and crisis planning to have that in place.
Thank you very much, Dave Sarche. He is the director of the Self-Directed Care Program at NAMI Collier County. I want to go back to the phones. We're almost out of time for today. I'm trying to get all of your questions and comments in. 1-877-428-8255 is the number. 1-877-GCU-TALK. Valarie Alker, I understand we have a caller on the line.
We have Anna from Estero.
Anna, thanks for calling the show today.
Hi, Valarie.
Hi, you have a comment or question today?
Yes, I just wanted to know what resources there are when there's a loved one in your family that clearly has a mental illness, and they have for years, but they don't want to admit it to themselves, and it's very sad to watch them go through this. I've experienced that with my father, but you don't know what to do, how to help, where to turn, and when I ever try to bring it up to him, he refuses to acknowledge it. I just wanted to know what resources there are for people like that.
Tell me where you live.
I work out in Estero, but I live in the Cape.
And what county is that? That is Lee County. there is a very strong Lee County connection with NAMI, which they're available. And really, no matter where you live, you can call NAMI. There's also an 800 number for the nationwide organization. So don't, you know, what I hear from all of these people here in the audience today is it's about a community, it's about family coming together to help one another, that mental illness is not something to be treated in isolation. And I understand NAMI is in Lee County, so their number, we're showing it on the screen, their number, or if you're not seeing it on the screen, the resources are available at our website, wgcu.org/your voice. So check that out, please do, okay? And I want to invite our listeners, if we haven't been able to get to your question today, if we haven't been able to get you on the phone today, please feel free to go to our website, wgcu.org/your voice, where you can post your comments or questions if they're for any of our panelists today. What we'll do is forward them on to our guests and let them answer your question. Just feel free, tell us. We want to hear from you. That's what your voice is about. It's about connecting with our community. That's why WGCU is here, to connect with our community. So give us a call. We are almost out of time for today. I want to thank each of our guest panelists who have joined us here in the WGCU studios to explore the issue of the availability of mental health resources in our community. To my extreme right, Dave Sarche is the director of the Self-Directed Care Program for NAMI Collier County. Dave, thanks for being here. Ron Stanford is he is a peer-to-peer counselor at the David Lawrence Center. You're with NAMI as well in Collier County?
Yes.
And Judge Peter Bell, he is the head of the Charlotte County Mental Health Court in Charlotte County. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. We are almost out of time. I know everybody's got their hands raised. I really appreciate it. I want to hear from Dana really quick. You can see Dana's tape at our website, wgcu.org/your voice. And Dana, I'll give you the final word before we have to say goodbye today.
I just want to say we've been talking about a lack of resources within our communities in Southwest Florida, and the one answer I have is to reach out to the legislator. In March, I shared my story in front of the Senate Subcommittee on Health and Human Services, who proposed 100% cut to our community health funding, and we're facing the same circumstances this year. We have to give our voices just as people, as a community, because we could lose those basic services.
We are discussing the availability of mental resources here in our community. We've heard from our callers, we've heard from our studio audience, we've heard from our panel. We're almost out of time for today's show. Let's take a couple of more comments or questions from our studio audience. Linda, tell us your name and tell us where you're from.
Hi, I'm Linda Meyerholz, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor from Estero. And 50 years ago, this coming Thanksgiving Day, my mother died of clinical depression. It wasn't assessed as clinical depression at that time, but there were no antidepressants available. You know, all of this is an evolving thing. And today there are medications to be helped, and I'm so encouraged by the internet because so much information is available that we had no knowledge of just 30 years ago or 20 years ago. Yeah, it's frustrating, but so much of our work has to be we have to look for the answers ourselves. We have to find the doctors, and we just have to be persistent on it. But my mother would be alive today had she lived today rather than dying 50 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Let's get a couple of more comments in. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're from.
Yes, my name is Jane Bevan, and I'm a Lee County resident, have been so for many, many years. I have been an advocate on mental health issues for many, many years. And currently I'm with the Lee County Consortium. And this is a group of agency people from different healthcare providers.
I'm going to have to interrupt because we're almost out of time. Do you have a comment?
Yes, my comment is that we must contact our legislatures. They are planning to cut services. We must contact them, and we must ask that they at least maintain the same level of money being provided. We have costs where a crisis stabilization bed costs $290 a day. And a forensic bed costs $700. And if somebody goes into the jails, they are not made to take their medications. It's part of the rules, it's part of the laws, they cannot be forced, so therefore they deteriorate.
We are all about that, and that is the last comment for today's show. Thank you very much for your comment. Thank you, all of you, for being here today. Your comments, your questions are appreciated. Thank you. That is all the time we have for this edition of Your Voice on Gulf Coast Live. But before we go, there is more information on today's show at our website, wgcu.org/yourvoice, where you will also find a list of all the resources mentioned. You can also watch videos of some people living with mental illnesses who came into our studios to share their emotional journeys toward recovery. Also online are all of our radio stories and shows about mental health from our Your Voice week of programming. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Valarie Edwards. Please join me on a regular basis as we discuss issues which matter to Southwest Florida on Gulf Coast Live, Monday through Wednesday at noon on WGCU Fort Myers 90.1 FM, WMKO Marco 91.7 FM. We are NPR for Southwest Florida.